What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a new video. So today, the topic of the video is handling scrub pythons. For years, scrub pythons have had a really bad reputation in the hobby, and in my experience, it's almost entirely undeserved. But in my opinion, a main reason why they have gained that reputation is because most people don't understand the animals and how to handle them. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over my years of working with scrub pythons that has led to me taking maybe a couple of bites a year for my over 100 scrub pythons. All right, so here's one of my barneck scrub pythons that I produced. This guy was born in 2022, and you've seen him in previous videos. So kind of to begin the conversation on scrub python handling, I want to go over some of the behaviors that they have that are not necessarily unique to them, but definitely accentuated in scrub pythons. One is that they are fairly active snakes when they are outside of their enclosures. As you can see with this guy here, he's moving around, not necessarily slowly, not fast, kind of deliberate, moderately paced movements. They're very visually oriented and they're always aware of their surroundings. So oftentimes movement around them can trigger a response to where they will immediately shift their attention, either in a curious or defensive way, kind of depending on the state of being of that snake in the first place. But a few things that I've learned to do with these snakes that always keep them calm while handling are the following. For one, never restrain them in any sort of way. Pressure on the spine, kind of like I'm showing you here. This is a very calm snake. But if a scrub python is in any sort of defensive position, any sort of top-down pressure on the spine is going to be something that elicits a negative reaction. So as you see, I'm just kind of letting him run through my hands. I'm not necessarily grabbing him or anything. Just kind of letting him do his thing. Another one is their tail. So scrub pythons are a semi-arboreal to arboreal python with prehensile tails, meaning that they can support their entire body weight from just that end of their tail there, meaning that a lot of their comfort within a handling session comes from the placement of their tail and what kind of grip they have on you with it. So as you can see right now, he's got the back part of his body wrapped around my hand, my thumb right there. It's not necessarily a hard grip, but it's a sturdy one to where if he were to fall, his entire body weight is supported by that tail. And even if he does fall like right there, as long as that tail anchor is secured, that's not a situation that is going to cause the snake to have any sort of a defensive or a negative response. Another thing that's important to do, especially if you're dealing with an animal that doesn't necessarily have the best temperament, is understanding that given their arboreal nature, these snakes are very inclined to move upward. So some pythons that are more terrestrial, be it a ball python or a blood python, when they're in your hands, they're not super comfortable being elevated. So they're kind of looking to go down to the ground. With a scrub python, it's the exact opposite. As you can see almost perfectly in cue, he is going right towards the lighting fixture on top of him. And that's really what they do. So if you want a scrub python to keep moving upward and away from you, you're going to keep the hand that is controlling the first third of their body above the hand that is controlling the back part of their body, to where if I turn my hands around like this, he's going to come basically back up to where he's going to be going back where he wants to be. So if you want that to be away from you, you want to keep this hand out in front so that the snake isn't immediately going to have a reaction to come back towards you. I'm going to go back over this in a little while when I go over using a hook with a scrub python. Obviously, when it comes to an animal like this that is very calm to begin with, that's not really as important of a principle. As you can see, I'm very trusting of this snake. Comes from me having raised this guy from out of the egg. But as is the case with a lot of captive bred scrub pythons, barnecks in particular, they have really good attitudes no matter what. So all these principles aside, you don't really need them with an animal like this, because I would trust this with, a young child or somebody who was brand new to handling snakes and potentially nervous about it, because this guy has a tremendous disposition. All right, another snake here, my Xanthic Moluccan scrub python, and she's not going to be a great example of what I'm about to talk about, but I figured I have an opportunity to show her off, might as well. But some of the negative aspects to look for when you're handling your scrub python, they're not all calm like these, even though most of them are. So when you do encounter one that doesn't have necessarily the best attitude, there are some signs to look for that they are in an agitated state. One, first and foremost, being that they're not going to be tongue flicking. So as you can see with her, she's kind of spontaneously tongue flicking, moving about, very slow tongue flicks, kind of not a whole lot of purpose to them. when a scrub python is really focused on you in a defensive situation, they're not going to be flicking their tongue, either that or in a very kind of aggressive way. But primarily they're going to be, non-flicking their tongue at all. So if you see that behavior, that could be a sign that the animal is not enjoying the interaction. Another one being if you have that animal in your hands and you are getting a really hard tail anchor. So as you saw from that last snake and from her periodically as well, they wrap their tails around you to help themselves feel secure. Well, that can go to a level of being too far to where you're feeling a significant grip where you can tell that they're intentionally putting pressure down on you. That could sometimes be followed by a bite. So that is something to be looking out for sure. If you get a really hard tail anchor from your scrub python, especially if that is coupled with the snake not flicking its tongue, could be a sign that you might want to get out of your predicament. Another sign to couple with those other two is that they're really hyper reactive to touch. So as you can see with her right now acting calm, I can come here, I can touch her on her back. She's not jerking at the sensory input of me touching her body. If she was in a situation where she wasn't feeling happy with the interaction, feeling defensive, whatnot, those touches would create an immediate kind of jerking back response, maybe into an S position, or maybe starting an effort to run away from you. So if your scrub python is overly sensitive to you physically touching them from the sensory of that body heat coming in touch with their body, it's obviously a sign that that animal is not enjoying the interaction. With a snake like that, that's definitely one you want to use a hook with. I'm going to be going over hooks in a little bit here, as that is potentially the most important tool in your arsenal when dealing with scrub pythons. And last but certainly not least is a behavior that sometimes you will see. I will not be able to get her to do it, but oftentimes a way that a bite can come during a handling session, they'll kind of be moving like this, stop, look down at your arm a little bit, and then you can be pretty sure that in the next second or two, a bite will be coming. That will often be coupled with some of these behaviors that I've been showing you. So in an instance like this, where this animal is acting very calm, it's moving in a very calm manner, not really showing any signs of agitation. This animal right here is not going to look down at my arm and bite me. But if it wanted to, it would stick right there for a second, kind of tilt its nose down towards my arm, and then after that, a bite is likely coming. So when that ever happens to me, hopefully I have a hook nearby where I try to grab the snake right by the crook of the neck with the hook to deter the animal from biting. Otherwise, move my hand to drop that target out of the way of the snake, which is something that I will be talking about a little more later, when to know to disengage from the snake in a safe way for both you and the snake. So some negative signs to look for when you're handling your scrub pythons. Here's one of my male Halmaheras. He just shed yesterday, so he is looking his absolute best. And another snake that will be a bad example for what I'm about to be talking about, but he will suffice nonetheless. And I had to pull him out because he just shed to admire him. But here are some things to do in an interaction with a scrub python when things are going sideways and you need to kind of redirect the snake and its attention away from you. So obviously right now, not something I need to do with him, but if I needed to, the one thing to primarily take advantage of is their arboreal nature and their impulse to go up. So if you are in a room with cages and racks or whatever, you're handling a scrub python and you can sense some tension in the animal, what you want to do is raise the snake up. Even just raising the snake above your head, especially if you have a hook, so it's not necessarily right there on your arm, will be a great way to disengage that snake from any sort of defensiveness towards you, because you're putting it in a position where it is already feeling safer as it is higher up, elevated, and in a position where it feels more comfortable. But another thing you could do, kind of take the snake, and I don't really have anywhere to go with it now, but put it upwards to where it starts fixating on maybe the top of a cage or the top of a rack system. Their attention will immediately go there, and you'll see the snake raising up towards that point of the room to try to get up there to gain a higher ground to become more comfortable. Obviously, if you let your snake go on top of your cages and your racks, then you have the added problem of trying to get the animal down from there. But as a way to redirect the snake's attention, that's going to work great. He's not really cooperating to show the best example, but take my word for it, it definitely works. So the other thing kind of similar to that, and I would consider this probably the number one trick with handling scrub pythons, is something that I kind of commandeered from some of the original retic keepers and breeders, and that is the spin move. So the main thing to worry about is where their attention is being faced. If it's being faced outwards or if it's being faced towards you. So For instance, if I didn't want this snake to be looking at me or to get close to my arms, then as soon as it's in a position like this, I'll spin and try to redirect him to another point, to now where his attention is no longer on me and is now on the Veracruz Mexicanus running amok in the background. So just like that, raising up and spinning with the snake will redirect their attention to a point that is not you. And with an animal like this, that's obviously not necessary, but sometimes I could definitely have been caught in rooms spinning 10 times in a row trying to get a scrub python's attention off of me. But it really does work great for scrub pythons of really any size, but particularly larger animals. If you can spin with them, kind of get their attention to go somewhere else that is not you. Now I've created a lot more distance between myself and the snake's head. So if this animal were looking to potentially bite me, now that chance is greatly decreased. And just a perfect example, I don't know if that's on the camera there, but where he's kind of riding on the track of the glass of this enclosure, I've created 3+, maybe even 4 feet of space between myself and the snake's head, keeping myself significantly out of the way. Obviously, the snake could still potentially bite me from this position, but I would see signs of it coming first, and then could use any of these other tips and tricks that I've told you guys so far to keep myself out of the way of that animal. The last thing to do when you're in an interaction with a scrub python that's not acting its best is really to know when it is time to drop that snake. And when I say drop the snake, I don't mean just plop it on the floor, obviously in a way that's both safe for you and for the animal. Disengage with it completely. Oftentimes I've found that will calm the snake down if you kind of give it a second to let the interaction kind of come to a halt, and then use a hook to re-engage them at that point. If a scrub has gotten to the point where you need to put it down to avoid a bite or avoid a situation where the snake could be compromising itself, that's definitely not an animal you want to go back and re-engage with your hands if you want to try to avoid a bite. So, obviously right now, not even nearly on my mind, but if what I had been talking about wasn't working, I couldn't redirect the snake's attention to the top of a cage or a rack or to the side of a cage like I was just showing there. If I was spinning and it wasn't working, if the tail anchor was too hard and things just aren't going the way I want it to, find a way to get that snake onto the ground safely and effectively, grab your hook and reassess the situation. So as a scrub python keeper, it is absolutely imperative to have a good set of snake hooks to deal with your animals. Even if your animals are calm, it's still very important because these snakes do have pretty strong feeding responses in their enclosures, and oftentimes without a snake hook, you're putting yourself in a precarious situation, even with the calmest individual. So I'm going to show you a few hooks that I use almost every single day, and without them, I would not be able to handle my scrub pythons as effectively. These are all by Get Hooked, not a sponsor or anything. They're just my favorite hooks, the ones that I like to use. And this is one of their smaller models. I think it is primarily made for baby arboreal vipers, but really use it for about anything. It's pretty lightweight, pretty sturdy, and for really anything that's under a year old, this is what I am primarily using for them. And then this hook right here that I had initially, this is my favorite hook I've ever had. It's about, I think, a 22-inch hook. And one thing that I particularly like about it, I'm not aware of all the terminology, but to where the shaft of the hook and then the end right there are pretty much in line. Some snake hooks will have very long hook ends over here. I find them kind of unwieldy to work with. If you're dragging a snake out of an enclosure, if it has branches or hides or whatever, you could catch the end of that hook on a branch, and now you've totally lost that grasp of the snake. Where it's kind of low profile like this, it makes it much easier to grab the snake and then avoid hitting cage equipment on your way out. But a hook like this, I'll use it for an animal that's a yearling, up to some adults, even 8, 9, maybe even 10-foot scrub pythons, ones that have a better attitude as well. The thing you always have to consider when using a snake hook is that the further or the bigger the hook you have, the further distance you create between you and the snake, the less control you have over that animal. But then obviously, if you're using a hook that is going to be shorter than the distance of that animal's strike range, you have to know that you're putting yourself in a situation where if that animal were to strike out, you're not fully protecting yourself with that hook. That, at the end of the day, comes down to knowing the individual, knowing the situation they're in. If the animal is already very aware of your presence, or if it's not, it might be a lot easier to scoop the snake out with a smaller hook because it's not already keyed in on you, and then you can get it out, put it onto the ground, work with it from there. But if the snake is already keyed in on you, you want to use a hook that puts as much space as possible between you and the snake for the sake of the strike range. This is the third hook I'm going to show right here. This is actually a miscut of their largest hook size. This is actually a 42-inch hook. Got it at a show, and when I saw it, I was like, all right, this is the perfect hook for an adult scrub python. I use this with my biggest individuals that I have. In the past, when I had a 14-foot scrub python, that hook was good enough to deal with that animal. So for anyone who has bigger scrub pythons, I would definitely recommend a hook like that. If not even potentially two hooks, especially if you're dealing with an animal that may have a more ornery than normal personality. But in summary, if you don't have a good set of snake hooks as a scrub python keeper, you're setting yourself up for failure. Here's one of my male Aru scrub pythons, and he's a good example for this because he's not necessarily hard to deal with, but not one that I completely trust. I acquired him as a bit of an older, wild-caught individual. Sometimes those animals never fully come around, even though he's not behaving too poorly right now. But he'll be a good one to show some of these principles of using a snake hook with a scrub python. The primary one being the hook placement on the animal. So that hook head should be about at the first third of the snake's body, creating this nice kind of balance to where my back hand is at the back third point of the body. And then also, like I was stating earlier, the hook is above my hand, where if I were to turn it, he's immediately going to come back and start moving upward, which I may not necessarily want him to do. So if I keep this hook above my hand, the chances of him coming back are much less. And then if he does, I have more time to kind of reorient myself. So another thing that is very important when handling scrub pythons, particularly when it comes to removing them from the enclosure, I try as little as possible to have to touch them on the top of the head with the hook. That is a trick that's been used for years, primarily when it comes to big pythons like reticulated pythons and Burmese, to where you tap the snake on the head with the hook and then that disengages their feeding response. Well, a similar kind of thing can be used for scrub pythons, but I have found that when you tap them on the top of the head, it really just agitates them more than anything. What I like to do, and I'll show this in a little bit, I like to go underneath the chin of the snake with the hook and kind of rub them underneath their head. And if they're acting defensive, kind of take that hook from under the head and push them up and back to kind of disengage any sort of defensiveness or feeding response that you're getting upon that snake exiting the enclosure. So that's another thing that with a hook is very important for handling scrubs. Another thing is to have the hook where it's angled upward like I'm having it right now, to the point where the snake is not going to look to climb that hook like I've been saying. They look to move upward. So if there is a chance for the snake to climb up the hook like that, it is definitely going to take it, where if the hook is angled down, there's nowhere to climb up, and that is a behavior that you're going to see much less frequently. And then, of course, you want to keep it angled upward, but not to the point where the snake is going to slide back down the hook. So making sure that you kind of hit that proper balance of an upward tilt in the hook, but not so far up to where the snake's body is actually going to slide back down that hook onto your hand. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take out this 3D printed perch. If the snake gets kind of past me at all when I'm going to grab it, it's going to grab onto that perch immediately, and now I'll be kind of wrestling the snake off the perch. Not good for me or for the snake. Kind of the rule of thumb with this is get them out of their enclosure as quickly as you can within reason without stressing yourself out, the animal, forcing them to do anything. But the longer that interaction takes, the more chance that it's going to be a negative one. So I'm going to open this hide up. And the snake is immediately giving me a little bit of attention, not necessarily defensive or food response right now. I would say, if anything, kind of just more curiosity. So what I'm going to do in an instance like this, while you're going into your other hide, the snake is not acting defensive. So I'm just going to go right in and grab it without much concern. And just like that, the snake is up. One thing that I will do with my babies, especially early on, to try to desensitize them a bit and to get them much more used to my presence, is I'll kind of come in hand, like with a open hand from the top of them, almost kind of in a way like a bird would or something like that. Kind of would seem a little bit counterintuitive, but that can really desensitize them to any sort of top-down sensory activity that would, in other cases, kind of trigger that animal into a defensive reaction. So I have found that from a young age, you can work that out of the animal it is something that you really should do as a measure to set the animal up to be a calm, confident adult. So right now, this is basically going about as well as it can. And I was confident in that because this snake has been with me now for about 10 months. It was born 10 months ago. And from day one, this was a very calm individual. So I knew that this was not going to be a laborious act to get the animal out of the tub, but that is what I would do for an animal like this, that is this young and has a good attitude. All right, so here's another one of my almost yearling scrub pythons from last year. And I know this guy is going to probably give me a little more of a hassle than that last one will. So he'll be a good example. You see him coming out now. Before he gets all the way out, once again, I'm going to remove that perch. But you can always already see he's kind of in an S-like formation. He is keyed in on me right now. He definitely knows that something's about to happen. So I'm going to take this hook and kind of lift the hide so I can see the full snake, and you can see kind of a defensive posture. But I'm going to remove the animal from the tub before really interacting with it. And this is kind of an example I was showing earlier. If I go under the chin and move the animal back, it immediately disengages that S curl to where now he throws kind of a slow tongue flick, and immediately he is kind of knowing what is about to happen. So I lift the snake up with the hook and then kind of try to get my hands on him when he is facing away from me as to not trigger a defensive response, and when I can effectively get him into my hand and then keep him moving. So you can see right now he's not moving a whole lot, still a bit unsure of the interaction, but as soon as I kind of have him more firmly in my grasp, he is starting to calm down, move away from me, and kind of tail anchor a little bit on my thumb. All some of those behaviors that earlier I said were some of the ones you want to look for. Now he's crawling over my arm, very nonchalant, very calm, doesn't mind this interaction at all. And that right there definitely takes a little bit of time, especially if there's an animal that's a little bit more bold, a little bit more defensive from when it was born, like this guy was. But with repetition, this type of handling doesn't need to be super frequent. I really just do it about once a week with these guys. Obviously, you can do it more frequently. There are instances where you can definitely stress out a snake to the point where it maybe stops eating or something with frequent handling. But I would say a few times a week is never going to be an issue, especially with an animal that doesn't get overly stressed from handling. Oftentimes, though, with wild-caught animals that I get that are not necessarily super thrilled to have me around, I'll just leave them be for a very long time. And in most cases, they will eventually come around to being at least calm enough to go about normal cleaning interactions, even sometimes to the point where they're super calm to where I would let them crawl over my neck. So with these guys, ultimately, patience is going to be the virtue, and just patience, persistence, and respect of the animal are going to be what you need to have a nice, calm scrub python. All right, everybody, thank you for checking out that video. Hopefully this was helpful to any scrub keepers out there that may be having problems with some of their animals. And if you're not already a scrub python keeper, hopefully this dispelled some of the rumors out there surrounding their temperament. If that is something that is holding you back from keeping scrub pythons, it is really almost entirely a myth. And if you just use some of these basic principles that I outlined in this video, it's going to be a great experience for you. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe here on the YouTube channel, like, comment, share, hit that notification bell so you don't miss another episode. I drop a video here every single Friday on the channel. I also have a podcast on the Trap Talk Reptile Network called Cush's Corner, which is live at 9 p.m. Eastern Time every single Wednesday. I am on Instagram at Scrub Shepherd, Stephen Cush on Facebook, and then also Cush Reptile on Morph Market. All of the links to those are in the description below. With all that said, thank you guys for checking it out, and I will catch you all back here next week for a new video.